Hey everybody, and welcome to another Friday night Figma presentation. I am Bill, and this evening we are going to discuss the basics of a design system, specifically how to set one of those up in Figma and what you're looking for reading through your design brief and how to add all the right components and make sure that you're doing everything as appropriately as you can be. And so, again, thank you for joining me this Friday evening. Hope everyone's week went well. And to begin with, we are starting a new project. We started yesterday, but I thought this would be as good a time as any to go over the basics of a design system. And so my project came with a design brief. And so the project manager, the PM, gave me or supplied me with information relating to the project, including information about target user and branding. And so that is extremely useful information because that cuts down on a little bit of the research I have to do, and it definitely points me in a direction that I need to go. It acts as sort of a North Star for the rest of my design. And of course, I'll say this now, all of this is of course impermanent. It's subject to change as these things are. Once I go through several rounds of iteration and usability testing, some of this is bound to change. However, this is what I'm starting with. And I received my design brief in the form of 2 PDFs, and I copied that information out of the PDFs and I pasted it here in my Figma canvas because that allows me to quickly remind myself if I forget of what the project summary is or the necessary steps that I need to take, or if I forget an aspect of the user or the branding for that matter. All of that is very quickly found if I keep it in the canvas here in Figma. And another reason I like to do that is not only does it keep it close at hand, it also reduces the chance that I'll get distracted. My PDFs open in my internet browser, and so if I have to Alt-Tab or Command-Tab over into my browser to take a look at the PDFs, there's always a distinct chance that I will fire up a new tab and navigate to YouTube, and we all know how much of a time sink that can be. And so I wanted to, it's a small way to minimize distraction, and so that may work for you. And so I copied the 4 main sections to my Figma canvas. We had the project summary, the project steps, the target user, and the branding. There we go. And so we will go over each one of these briefly so we know what we're looking at. And so as far as the project summary is concerned, and this is a so we're not mincing words, so we're not getting confused on the semantics here. This project, or the product that I am creating, is part of a project for an education course. And so when it says project summary and project steps, that refers specifically to the steps I need to take in this exercise to satisfy the requirements in the building of this product. And so I understand that the word project can be a bit misleading in this scenario. However, I copied and pasted these with minimal style change, and so I wanted to present them as they're presented to me, so we're all on the same page, and we're all on the same wavelength. And so to briefly go over the project summary, I will need to decide on a name for the company, find an appropriate UI kit that will be the basis of my product's visual styles, and create an artboard in my design software, Figma, containing the UI kit that I've chosen as the basis for my visual styles, and then create a basic color palette from my UI kit, and finally finalize the font that I will use. And next are the project steps, and it's a 4-stepper, this one. And do bear in mind, this entire project is not just creating a design system. This is one of the very beginning portions of a much larger exercise or unit in this education track, and by the end I expect to have a fully working prototype that has gone through multiple rounds of usability testing, so please bear that in mind. And so for the project steps, we can see that we have the time block here to the right. Step 1 is name the company, and they allotted 30 to 60 minutes for developing a company name. Step 2 is to find and download an appropriate UI kit. Step 3 is set up a color palette and choose a font. And step 4 is submit your work and seek feedback from the mentor. And of course, there's a weekly time set aside where I speak with my mentor for about half an hour, and we'll go over the previous week's work and address any questions or concerns I may have about the curriculum. And let's take a closer gander at the time estimate here. So we have up to an hour for the company name. We have 4 hours to find and download an appropriate UI kit, and then up to 4 hours to set up a color palette and to come up with a font system, typography. And lastly, we have 30 minutes, which is the time block that the Zoom meeting is always scheduled for with the mentor. And as we can see here on the upper bounds, we have an hour, 4 hours, 4 hours. So we have 9 hours right here. And then if we want to add in the mentor, it could be 9.5. So we're looking at between 9.5, maybe 10. If you spend too much time, and if I end up spending too much time in one area, I'd be looking closer to 10, possibly more hours. However, for the sake of doing this quickly but also smartly, I'm going to try to keep it closer to the 9.5 hour time block that I'm given here. And I'm going to add that I'm going to make a choice here, and this could end up not working for me. And depending on how that goes, I will definitely let you know what this ends up looking like. But step 2, find and download an appropriate UI kit, which is part of the summary as well. My mentor is awesome and gives me some leeway in exactly how I approach things, as long as I get the job done. And I'm against using a UI kit. I understand I understand why they're used and when they're used. However, at this point, I thoroughly believe that I'm quick enough in Figma and I understand all the foundations and principles well enough that I don't want to use a UI kit. It's going to, for a number of reasons. I'm not the designer is the big reason. Number one, I would like the practice, and a UI kit is likely to either not include some UI patterns that I will want later on, or it will include too many UI patterns, and I don't want to have to deal with the organization thereof, putting that in my design system. And so looking at this time block here, 4 plus 2, so I have 6 to 8 hours essentially to develop my own UI kit, which seems agreeable. Like that seems very doable. So I'm perfectly fine with that. And of course, I'll discuss that with my mentor to make sure that I'm not going completely, I'm not going over the wall there. And then we have information about a target user, a single target user. And so as we can see here, this is a 24 to 38-year-old, likely to be a man. It says user base is 72% men, high income earners, and they take biking very seriously. They will spend a lot of time on this investment, so are very picky and do their research. And the project that I'm working on, the one I chose, because that doesn't make sense outside of context, is an e-commerce solution, or it's a fix for an existing e-commerce solution for a company that sells higher end, medium to higher end bicycles. And the problems that were identified, there were 2 main problems, and they all point to an issue with conversion. The first issue is the company has identified through its analytics that there are a large number of people who open multiple windows or multiple tabs to look at several bicycle models at the same time. And then there are also a group who will put 1 or 2 items in a shopping cart and then abandon the cart. So it's loss of conversion sort of on both fronts. And the task more or less is to redesign the checkout process so that it's a lot more to just streamline the checkout process so we can boost conversion, and to add a feature wherein the user, the consumer, can compare different bicycle models. So I need a project or a product comparison feature So those two things together are going to be the core functionalities of the app. They're going to make up the MVP, or minimum viable product, for this app. And with that in mind, hopefully this target user makes more sense why it's mentioning biking and high income. So lastly, we have information about the branding. And it says here, brand personality. Our brand, the company, is an expert in the field who is always knowledgeable about the very latest trends and best products related to biking. And we have some brand attributes here, which are very important. The brand is savvy, focused, serious, and dependable. And that sounds great to me. As I stated, some of the work has been done for me. I don't necessarily need to come up with a brand personality or brand attributes on my own, and so that's possibly hours of work that I don't have to do. And so, with all that in mind, specifically, we want to definitely keep in mind target user and branding, which is another reason, as I stated, that I copy and paste this into the Figma canvas so I can keep a constant eye on the target user and the branding and the brand attitudes and the brand personality, that is to say, so I can have constant reminder of who I'm designing for and what this product is going to look like, what it needs to stand for. And so if I'm constantly reminded, I am less likely to make silly decisions that have nothing to do with this and would go against, that would be very off-brand. And so that's a benefit of having this information close at hand. And so the first step we see here is decide on a name for the company. Okay, well, anytime I'm going to complete a step or make a decision in some form or fashion, I'm going to refer back to both the target user and the branding, because the decisions that I make need to reflect both the target user and the branding, the brand personality, and the brand attributes. And excuse me, when I first began working on this product for this project, I thought of, for whatever reason, the brand Peloton came in my mind. And Peloton, or peloton, is a French word used in, you find it in races or where many cyclists are racing together or traveling together. And a peloton is the sort of, if I understand correctly, middle clump of riders, the middle chunk of riders. And I think it's very clever what Peloton did as far as the choice of that name. It's, despite being a foreign word, despite being a French word, it's easily pronounceable or in English, and it doesn't, it has sort of a foreign sounding name, but it also doesn't sound, I don't know, it doesn't sound too interesting or out there. And so I thought the choice of brand name for Peloton is brilliant. And I wanted to do something similar to that. And so what I did, and I did this last night, I'll go ahead and go back to Brave here, is I went to my favorite search page, and I typed in, French cycling words. Because I wanted more or less sort of a lexicon or a glossary of French cycling terms. And let's see here, I don't remember exactly which, no, it wasn't that site. I found, yes, I believe it's this site here. And so I found a website called The Inner Ring, which is news, comment, analysis, and chat all about cycling and cycling competitions and whatnot. And they have a page published about 11 years ago. It's the Lexicon of Cycling Terms, and they have a ton of terms here for cycling, and many of them, if not all of them, I think it's all of them, yeah, all of these are French terms, and I wanted to go in that direction like Peloton did. And so, let's see here, yeah, Peloton is actually right here, and so Peloton means platoon, it's the main pack or bunch of riders. And so I wanted to do something like that, and so that what they did was choose a word that is French, or they didn't choose it because it's French. They chose it because it is it's related to cycling, specifically professional cycling, and it's easy to pronounce because they could have just as easily chosen like a maillot vert right here, which means green jersey, but that wouldn't have worked as well because that would be very difficult to pronounce. And so let me close some of these tabs here. Ooh, there we go. And so I decided, based on a lot of the words that I saw here, I looked at them and I analyzed them all for easeability of pronunciation. And I wasn't worried about whether or not what the word was, if someone knew what the word was in French. So I went with the word cima, which means summit. And I chose that for two reasons. The first one being cima is easy to, and I'm supposing it's cima. I need to check if it's kima or not. Either way, I still like it. Easy to pronounce for English speakers. And the definition is summit. And that specifically struck a chord with me because summit is good for both the target user and the branding. And so let's think about that for a second. So a summit, which is the peak of a mountain, or basically, or less, or more generally, it's the peak of something. And excuse me. And so as far as the branding is concerned, let's see if cima, summit, satisfies the branding requirement. So we have savvy, focused, serious, and dependable. Okay, well, we'll contextualize this. So we're speaking about bicycles. Savvy, which is savvy is the quality of being shrewd. It's shrewdness or practical know-how. And so one definitely needs practical know-how. One needs to be savvy and able to ascend via bicycle to a summit. And as far as focus is concerned, well, one also definitely needs to be focused if they're to make it up such a grueling path as to make it to the top or the peak of the summit. And serious, you wouldn't be able to, a cyclist would not be able to arrive at the summit unless they were serious about doing that. And then lastly, dependable. The cyclist would need to depend, of course, on themselves in the way of health, but they would also need to depend on their gear, their bicycle, to make it to the summit. And so as far as the work I've done so far on that, cima or summit fits the bill for the branding. And it also, I believe, fits the target user as well. In this first part right here, they take biking very seriously. Well, again, a serious rider is unless a rider is serious, the rider is unlikely to make it to the top or the peak or the summit. And so all of that together leads me to think that cima is a good word. So I'm going with that there. And so the next step would be, if we go back to our project steps, would be find and download an appropriate UI kit. So again, I'm going to not do that. I'm going to choose to not do that, at least for now, unless I'm told to specifically. I do like bending the rules a little bit where I can, and so I'm going to create my own UI components, and given the time that I'm allotted for this exercise, I feel very confident that I will be able to do that. And so I'm going to skip this step for now. Each one of these steps does not build on the other, so I'm not worried about skipping a step and doing something incorrectly. The next step, step 3, would be set up a color palette and choose a font. Okay, well, we're going to use the same. We're going to exercise the same judgment we did on the name with colors. And so concerning colors, we need to think about the target user, and I guess more specifically, we need to think about the branding. And we have the brand attributes here, so we need to choose colors that line up with our brand attributes. And to review, the brand attributes are savvy, focused, serious, and dependable. And if you, for a good list of what color goes with what feeling or emotion or connotation, I suppose, you could, of course, just open a browser, new tab, and type in, can't spell, you could do a internet search for color meanings. And of course, there are a multitude of thousands of pages to choose from. I've been using for a little bit now color-meanings.com. I'm a big fan of I don't think any one site in particular does a great job of doing an exhaustive study on exactly what each color means. You have to do a lot of research. However, as far as a general understanding is concerned, I'm a big fan of this page here. And so, especially this hero image right here, it's the psychology of colors. And it's a bit of a word cloud, and so we have a lot of information here. And we have some information regarding we have colors and then some of their meanings. And so this is a very quick view of the colors and what they mean. And so if the meaning you're looking for happens to show up right here, then you're good to go. Otherwise, you can scroll down, and each color has its own subsection. For instance, red, you can look at all the different color meanings behind red, the symbolism, the effects it may have on the user or whoever's viewing it. And we also have positive and negative aspects of that color and seeing that color. And so you want to, of course, take all of these into account when you are creating, you're coming up with a color scheme or a color palette to use in any of your designs. And so we're savvy, dependable, and let's see here, yeah, savvy, focused, serious, and dependable. And so we need to come up with colors that reflect those attributes. And I don't want to sort of not necessarily waste your time, but it would be a poor stream if I went through each page individually and talked about each color, because certainly there are other better videos out there that can explain not color theory, but meanings behind color. And of course, do bear in mind that the meanings of color do change across cultures. So that's definitely something you'll want to remember and stay cognizant of. However, I did some of the research ahead of time, and as far as the meanings are concerned, we'll go ahead and I'll do this a bit out of order. So we have dependable and serious. I'm going to consider those together. And serious and dependable. My previous product that I finished maybe a couple of weeks ago, I also had it had a brand attribute that I identified as reliable and needed to look and feel reliable. And after much research, I settled on a really nice, well, I thought it was nice, a nice blue color. And blue symbolizes reliability, dependability, and trust. And those were three of the biggest, most important attributes of that product. So I went with blue on that. And I'm going to use, I identify blue as falling under the category mostly of dependable, reliable. We're going to go with blue on that one. And so let's see here. I can type in blue. And we have serious. And so as far as serious is concerned, that can be, again, up to debate what exactly a color is when it's serious. However, from what I've read, your dark colors and your grays are serious, as well as brown, interestingly. And brown is a bit of a brown's interesting. I don't use brown a lot. I like the color brown, but I don't use it in my designs a lot. I find it, because every person's monitor is different, every person's screen is different. I try to choose colors that aren't going to stray too far away from what they're going to look like, because very few people have a color calibrated monitor. And so I try to choose a color that if it strays a little bit on what it looks like on someone else's screen, it's not going to destroy the appeal or the emotion that I'm trying to impart. And so browns can very easily for example, like become too ruddy, or sometimes I've seen browns go like a weird like ochre or sort of dark yellow, and I want to avoid that for now. Maybe brown would be appropriate if this were printed material. If we were dealing with Pantones or specific CMYK values, then that would be something to consider. But I'm going to at least for right now avoid brown. Brown would be interesting because dirt is brown, and this cycling shop that I'm developing for is certainly going to sell a number of like motocross and gravel bikes and whatnot, and so that would be a familiar color, and it would also fit the serious attribute right here, but I'm going to avoid it for now. And instead, for serious, I'm going to focus on one of my dark colors. And as far as focused is concerned, I'm going to, let's see here, let me update this. Dark. And so as far as focused is concerned, that is another one that was slightly difficult for me to find out exactly what color to use, and there were many theories and ideas about what really said focused, and so I was getting some conflicting information there, and during my research, and so I started to think about it. I flipped the question on its head, and instead of concerning myself with trying to find what color indicates or has the connotation of focus or focused, I instead asked the question, okay, well, what color is the opposite of that? What is distracting and wild and really out there? And I come up with a bunch of colors that like your yellows and some of your oranges in that area of the spectrum. Those are frequently identified with youthfulness and abandon and sort of fun, lively colors. And so I focused on the opposite of that, and I came back around to blue. However, not necessarily a lighter blue, not like a baby blue or a sky blue, focusing more on a deeper blue. And so that's what I'm going for now. And of course, that is, can't spell. So that is, of course, subject to change. And for savvy was an interesting one. And so savvy, which of course, shrewdness or practical know-how about how to do something, that was difficult. That was maybe, I find that to be more of an abstract attribute more of an abstract attribute in the context of choosing for color, and I'm sure over the years I'll get better at that. But for savvy, I started to think, what does savvy mean in the context of cycling? And I thought, well, that's someone who knows their gear very well, who can could talk to you for hours about gear ratios and seat post heights, to the millimeter that they like, so they have the right angle when they're bent over the handlebars. Preferred handlebars, know about all the different ways of actually cycling, and someone who's a professional, and that again lines up with our target user. They take biking very seriously, high-income earners. And so I thought that it would be interesting to take that idea of sort of bicycle gear savviness and play with it just a little. And I ended up using a brick red color for savvy. And my thought process behind that specifically is I stepped back and I took a bit of a holistic view of the target user and the branding. And I wanted to see if there's something here that I'm missing, something between the lines that I'm not seeing. And one thing that occurred to me is what these attributes have in common, or could be reasoned to have in common, and that would also be in common with our target user, is the idea of confidence. And that also ties in with the name. One would need confidence to get to the summit. And as such, I thought, okay, well, what would express both savvy and confidence? and as I stated, I ended up with a brick red, and to me that speaks to both because or that speaks to confidence anyway, as one would need confidence to sort of. I'm picturing what I was picturing what it would look like on a like a kit or a bib, which is the article of clothing that professional cyclists wear. You might see them in the street going, 30 or 40 people cycling all at once. And that sort of outfit that they wear is sometimes a bib or a kit, depending on what type it's for. And I thought a bold color would be something you might see on a confident rider, on a savvy rider. And so that is my train of thought as to how I got there. And of course, after I speak with my mentor, I'm very open to being wrong about that conclusion. However, I'm somewhat confident that I can defend it fairly well, but we'll see how that goes next week. Excuse me. And so I have my colors so far. And so let's see here. Savvy is a red color. So altogether we have a red, blue. Red. We have two blues and a dark color. And so I went to, with that in mind, I went to one of my favorite websites, which is, let's see here, I'm never sure how to pronounce this correctly. It's Coolers or colors.co. And what Colors is, let me fire up a new tab here. So Colors is a random palette generator. And so if you go to their website here and click Start the Generator, it will present you with a palette that has created. It's always slightly distracting going here because I love some of these colors so far. Actually, I'm going to favorite that one. Lemon. So it'll present you with the color palette, and if you do not like the palette, you can press the spacebar and it will generate a new palette for you. And you can do that all day long, and you can sign up for free and you can save palettes, you can save gradients, you can save specific colors. And so it's a fantastic website. It's a great resource to use if you are generating a resource of colors that you like. And of course you can go back anytime and remember, oh, I like that color, or I like that color, and use them all across your projects. And so this is a fantastic resource to have. Ooh, I really like that slate gray. But in any event, I came up, having used colors or coolers, another thing about how I did this was I kept I kept generating new palettes, and then when I find a color I like, I clicked the lock button, the toggle lock, and when you click that, for example, if I click the toggle lock on maximum blue and generate a new palette, it's going to it's not going to change this color right here. And so I was able to do that over and over, and oh, Cinnabar's nice. I was able to do that over and over until I came up with a palette that I liked. As far as the dark and the light colors, I knew I have favorites of those already. I have favorite, off-white and off-black on standby, so I was able to plug those in pretty quickly. And after a little bit of work with the site, I was able to come up with this color palette. And I didn't want to spend too much time on this because I am aware that I am inside a time block. So the white, as you can see here, FA, and it's calling this color Jet, which is 31, 31, 31. These colors, I like these colors, and I use them on a few of my projects for my off black and my off white. So I knew what these are going to be, and then I was able to generate new palettes over and over and over until I found this blue here on the left, which is called Indigo Dye, and this really nice red color here, which is called Brick Red. And then I realized that I may need a success color, sort of a tertiary color, if I ever had some sort of message. For example, if a user added an item to a cart, I may want to have some sort of success message that comes up and say, successfully added to cart or something along those lines, and I know that I want that to be green, and so I found this sea green color here. And before I really settled on these colors, I went ahead, of course, and I checked them for contrast using the WebAIM color contrast tool. And I double checked that, which was unnecessary as it turns out, because it was the same contrast values with A11Y's color contrast plugin in Figma. And so it made checking the accessibility guidelines for color, it made that very easy. And if you know me and are familiar with my stance on accessibility, accessibility comes first. And so I'm considering it at every step of the way, because I want all users to be able to use this product in a comparable way. And so I've already checked all of these colors for the contrast, and they look good. Everything's at least AA. A few of the combinations are AAA, which is good, but that's sort of gilding the lily, and I don't want to. The bare minimum's AA. That lets you know that you're meeting the minimum spec, and so because I don't want to spend an inordinate amount of time on my colors and whatnot, I made sure that all of them were at least 4.51 to 1 ratio, color contrast ratio, and which is AA. And so once I hit the AA spec, I moved on. And so after that, let's see here. After that, I was satisfied so far with the colors I had found, and I moved on to the second part of step 3, which is choosing a font. Now, choosing fonts is always interesting. I've worked with a few designers before who, one guy in particular, was a font wizard, and he knew a lot about fonts. He'd actually, I'm not sure if it was for he went to school for design, and when he was at that school, if I remember correctly, he made his own font, and which is not easy to do in the least, and it's a very nice looking font. And he knows, yeah, anyway, he's a font wizard, and so he was always correcting me on my choice of fonts, and he really helped me understand typography. But he has something that I do not have. He just has this sixth sense for picking out the right font, and I don't have that quite yet. I can get very close, but I'm usually sometimes corrected on my font choice. And so I was speaking to my mentor about that, about sort of not being able to tell exactly which font to choose, because the font that you choose is all about, it's about the choice of font face sets the tone of the message. And that is to say, for example, if you had one message that was written in Comic Sans or Papyrus or Comic Papyrus, and you had the same message written in Helvetica and then again in Times New Roman, you're going to get a different tone or feeling from each message in each typeface. Even though the message is the same, the tone is going to be different, because one's going to appear playful, one's going to appear more formal and rigid, and another one's going to feel more maybe professional or dry. And so choosing the font is really about establishing the tone. The colors certainly help do that. However, fonts also go a long way, and that's something that I'm working on. And my mentor pointed out, and I don't think he was joking, and this has worked out fairly well for me, is he suggested focusing, or if you're having trouble deciding between a few fonts, making a decision, he advised looking at a few characters, like comparing certain characters between different font faces. And he suggested the L, and I, having done a bit of my own sort of practice with typography, I also identified the A as a character to compare with between fonts. And of course, realistically, you could probably choose any number or letter, any character, any glyph, and compare them that way. Or you could do a more holistic view and just have the entire glyph set and compare them, looking at each character line by line. But that seems a bit burdensome, and so I prefer to look at as few characters as possible and try to come to a conclusion with that, knowing that it's not going to be perfect no matter what I do. And so I took a look at, or I chose 3 fonts, and I wrote the A and the L. So I wrote AL, I suppose, in 3 different fonts in order that we can sort of look at this and see how it works and understand, see if we can come up with an idea of what sort of tone these fonts are giving off, what sort of appeal they have, or what they're saying outside, what they're saying beyond the actual words that are written. And so we have Poppins, Work Sans, and Gelasio, or Gelasio, I'm not sure how that's pronounced exactly. And the Poppins and Work Sans. So Poppins is a sans serif font, and Work Sans is as well. And many of our modern sans serif fonts have sans in the name, which makes it easier if you're just looking through a list and you don't see an example of the text. And so Work Sans is also a sans serif font, and Gelasio is a serif font, as we can see here, because it has serifs on the top of the L, bottom of the L, and then at the, I'm not sure what that bit's called, at the very bottom of the, on the baseline part of the A here. And another interesting thing to notice here is there's certainly a difference between the L in each one of these, but there's a larger difference between the A in Poppins and the A in Work Sans and Gelasio. And the A that you see in Work Sans and Gelasio, I'm the type of person who should know the name of this, but I don't. The specific way of writing A this way, when I'm with my handwriting, I write my A's this way, and I've gotten fast enough to where it takes just as long to do the Poppins style. And I think Poppins is the style of this A is this is a take on what they teach in school. It doesn't have this extra hangy bit at the top here, and it's less formal. The Work Sans A and the Gelasio A are both they're both formal, and Work Sans is kind of, the more I look at this, the more I'm realizing this. Work Sans is kind of in the middle between Poppins and Gelasio. So Poppins is professional in a way. However, like for example, the L has no, I don't, again, I'm forgetting my words here, has no little sort of pseudo serif like the Work Sans has here, this little foot. And it's definitely much farther away from Gelasio. On the other hand, so it has a more formal, a more professional L, I would argue. More formal in the sans serif font families. Certainly the L here in Gelasio is more formal. However, the A is less formal, or it's less traditional form of writing the A, and so Poppins is an interesting mix of the more formal A, but so a less formal A, but a more formal L. And so it's a bit of a mix going on there. And because I didn't want to belabor the process of choosing a font, because it can easily, with all the fonts there are in the world, it can easily, one could easily spend hours upon hours trying to choose a font, and that's sort of a hole I fell into on my last big project, and I don't want to repeat that mistake. And so I don't want to belabor the process, much like I'm belaboring this talk here. And so I decided to go with Poppins and then discuss that with my mentor to get his expert feedback on whether or not that choice is appropriate, taking into account our brand attributes here, as well as our target user, what they're going to think about the choice of Poppins. And the font that I've used for this sort of presentation so far, we're up here in Design System and all this information down here, all of this is in Poppins, and the more I look at it, the more I like it. However, just because I like a font doesn't necessarily mean it's appropriate for the task at hand, and so that's something to bear in mind. And so we've covered the colors, we've covered the colors. I've discussed my reasoning behind why I want to develop my own UI kit or my own UI patterns, and we've discussed the typography. And what it was interesting looking at the project steps as well as the project summary. I did not read ahead, which is usually my preferred way of doing things, so I'm aware of what's coming up. But I noticed that there are two steps that I understand to be missing from this project, and maybe they're covered in the next exercise. However, it does not cover imagery slash photography, and it does not cover iconography. And to me, those are both of those are as or they're very important to your design system. Your iconography is it's an extension of your. Okay, so iconography and photography slash imagery are going to be just as much of an extension of your branding, your brand attributes, your brand personality, as your typography choices and your color palette choices. And so you want them to all fall in line. And I'm supposing that they're going to request the addition of those two things, the imagery slash photography as well as the iconography, to the design system in a future exercise. However, I was maybe because of the time block was growing so large, they didn't want to include it here, and so I would understand that. In any event, if in the future exercises for this project they don't ask for that iconography and imagery, I'm going to make choices there anyway, just so I'll have a thoroughly fleshed out design system. And because that's just going to because that is going to take some time up front, of course, making these decisions. However, the reward is going to be I'm going to save time later by setting myself up correctly to begin with. I'll be saving myself time later when I'm making a dozen or 2 dozen high fidelity screens. I'm going to want that structure in place where I can easily look back at my design system and know what I'm looking for and choose what to go for. And so with all this in mind, having discussed all this, I wanted to show you some of the work that I had done so far on my design system. And before I show you, bear in mind, this is in no way complete. I was working on it up to the point that about 10 minutes before I started this stream. And so it looks unfinished because it is unfinished. So bear that in mind. And let's see here. So here we go. So I created, how many frames did I create here? I think I created like 6 frames. Each frame, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frames, including the cover, and this acts as the thumbnail for viewing in Figma. I came up with 6 frames, each one for a specific use. And so again, the first one's just a thumbnail. Second one is for color palette, and then typography, iconography, UI patterns, and lastly imagery. And some of these are more complete than others, and again that reflects the little amount of time that I put into this so far. And I did not have a way to quite set up how I want the color palette to look, so I just created swatches of the colors. And I did not have time before the stream began to add in the, I don't know what colors calls that. Is that, yeah, sea green. I didn't have a chance to add in the sea green color yet, so I'll be adding that. And I'll add some text as well to explain to anyone who views this, as well as my mentor, why I chose what I chose, and I will also give the WebAIM contrast values for various combinations of these colors. And I find it easier to do a accessibility audit as you work instead of doing it at the very end, because it's easier to do it sort of piecemeal. And so I will have a little bit of text explaining my decision and defending my choices. And so, because I want it to be above reproach. And then, let's see here, I did some work on the typography. Again, this is, I'm less worried about there being an issue with my colors, and I'm slightly more concerned about having gone with the wrong font faces here. However, again, I didn't spend I was conscious of the time that I was using to choose typography, to choose a font face. And so I went with what I thought is correct. I can defend it fairly well, I think, but we'll see. And I just left it at that. I didn't want to spend too much time on something that would turn out to be wrong anyway. And so, try to conserve my time here. And so I created, let's see here, 5 different styles that I would use, and I'm going to eventually turn these into styles. And as you can see here, I have nothing selected. I have no layers selected. And if you look at the right sidebar, the design panel, I've already I've already created my styles for my colors, and or at least each one of them except the sea green at 100% opacity. And I will, once I get the go-ahead on these, or once I decide these are good to go, I'll add some variations on these, maybe an 80% opacity, maybe sort of an off version of each one of the colors for different reasons. And of course I'll check those for accessibility as well. But I've already added these, and of course if they do change dramatically, it's easy to get rid of a color style or just change a color style. It's very easy in Figma. And I believe my last one of my videos one of my streams not too long ago discussed styles. And I would, if you're going to work on a project that you know is going to take a long time, 100 hours or so, something like that, it would behoove you, in my opinion, to get into the habit of using libraries and color styles. And I already have a grid style set up specifically for the design system. This is not a grid style I set up for any sort of device I'm going to be making prototypes on. That comes later. In any event, I have, and I need to declare these styles once I'm done messing around with them. And so I have 3 headline styles, the H1, H2, and H3, and I have a paragraph style, so this will just be your normal body text. And then I have I wrote for pre-formatted because I wanted to keep the theme I was using here of our HTML tags. And so all of these, the top 4, H1, H2, H3, and P for paragraph, all of these are pop-ins at various weights and various sizes. And then lately I've been in the habit of pairing up my sans serif typefaces, my sans serif fonts, with a monospaced or a pre-formatted text, a pre-formatted font. And so in this case, I used a font, what is this called? Yeah, Overpass Mono. And I very much like the way this looks and how it contrasts with the choice of pop-ins. But the problem with monospace font is that it's monospaced, and so it can take up more space than a non-monospace font at the same font size. And so, for example, and this is a great example here, the paragraph font, the body font that I went with is Poppins with a medium font weight, and we can see here that the font size is 15. Well, this monospace font, which is Overpass Mono, it's semi-bold, but the font weight doesn't really affect the width of the text area. And so I'm turning that back to semi-bold. You can see that this is size 14. And Poppins here is size 15. The size 14, even though it's the same text, is wider than the size 14 Poppins. And so that's something to remember, is every character is going to have exactly the same width. Whereas, for example, you compare, okay, that's a good, yeah, if you look at the B and the L here, they have different weights in Poppins because they're not monospace, but the B and the L here in the Overpass Mono have exactly the same width. That's why they're called monospace. And so that's something to be aware of and to use it judiciously. And so I'm only going to use this font for a few. It only has a few use cases. It's sort of a secondary font. And the reason that I chose a monospace font, beside the fact I think it looks cool, I think it looks good, one needs a much better reason than that. And when I was... went the wrong way. When I was choosing that font, I also wanted to take into account the target user and the brand attributes. And I thought, or in my mind, the monospace font, Overpass Mono, satisfies 3 out of these 4 branding requirements. I find it to be focused, serious, and dependable. Very frequently for me at least, I encounter monospace fonts when I am writing HTML and CSS and other markup. And so to me it's very dry, and to the point. And there's a dependability or a reliability in that font, and there's definitely a consistency, and it's visually consistent because it's monospaced. It's a serious font. Monospace fonts, for the most part, they're serious. They are what you might see on for someone who's writing code or doing something of that nature. It's serious work, so I chose that sort of a serious font, and it's also focused. It only provides, that's to say, it's not distracting. It only provides what information you need and nothing more. It's not for fun text. And my thought is, where I'm going with this is, I want to use this font for the product comparison portion of of the Figma website, or the Figma app that I'm going to work on. And so for the headings of rows and columns will be written in Poppins, but for any sort of specific numbered object, for example, a gear ratio, the gear ratio will be written in the monospace font, and heights and widths and things that are measured will be in the monospace font. And it's going to be it's going to have a dry, matter-of-fact look to it, because I want the user to be able to make quick decisions and not have to worry about misreading anything. So I want it to be abundantly clear what they're looking at and what it means, and that does tie in to the target user. As it says here, they take biking very seriously, and secondarily, as it says here, they will spend a lot of money on this investment, so we're very picky and do their research. And so I want to make the research as painless as possible. And one of the ways that I intend on doing that is presenting. I'm going to take into account how the research is going to be presented. And I want it to be as legible and as readable as possible. And I would almost be so bold as to say boring. And because research doesn't need to be exciting, and specifically if the user is about to spend, as it says here, as I copied and pasted this from the design brief, a lot of money, and that ties in with high income earners. If they're going to spend several thousands of dollars on something, I want to instill a sense of confidence in them, that they can trust the website, they can trust the app. And so my way of doing that is to deliver specifically regarding the product comparison feature I'm going to develop. I want to present that information as simply as I can, and I want it to be in the most performant way that I can do it. And so I'm going to again judiciously use the monospace font to get that done. And of course I will discuss that with my mentor, and if there are any major changes to any of these things that I have brought up, I will rediscuss them at a future stream. And as far as the iconography is concerned, I'm going to go with my old favorite collection of iconography, which is let's see here. There we go. It's the Material Design Icons pack that I found for Figma. And this is based on the material design icons, which Google has created. Material design is Google's version of Apple's human interface guidelines. And overall I prefer the way Google made a lot of their icons. They make more sense to me, but I am biased because I'm an Android user. However, it's what I go with. And so I'm a big fan of this icon pack, and the icon pack has hundreds of icons, each in one of 5 different styles. As we can see here in the left sidebar, the layers panel, we have filled style, outline style, rounded, two-tone, and sharp. And they are what they say on the tin. And for previous projects, I've used filled and outlined. I've used outlined and rounded before. Two-tone I really like. As we can see here, it is what it says. These are two-toned icons. I really like the way these look, but I just can't. I haven't had the right project to use them yet, and I'm not going to force them in a project where they don't make sense, because they're going to, if they don't make sense, if they're inconsistent with the rest of the design, they're going to stand out, and I don't need my users seeing anything that stands out unless it's like an amazing deal or an example of great UI, and so this would not be that. So I will not be using two-tone right now, possibly in the future there, two-tone. And what I'm going to go with is sharp, and sharp is the kind of the same thing as rounded, but sharp instead of rounded. And a good way to think about that is if we look at this icon here, it comes to exact 90-degree corners instead of having any sort of corner rounding going on. And yeah, I can't add any corner rounding to it, but the rounded version of this will have rounded corners, as one would expect. And I'm going to I'm going to use the sharp material design icons in my design, and I copied Material Design Icons has an icon for a cyclist, and I think they use this mostly in Google Maps. If you type in directions somewhere, it gives you the option of like walking, driving, public transport, or a bicycle. And I think this is when that is used. This is the icon for the bicycle. And I did not have time to, well, that's not exactly true. What I'm going to do for this iconography frame is I'm going to copy over all of the icons that I'm going to use for this product and arrange them in a visually pleasing way, and then include some text as to why I chose Sharp and why I chose this set of icons. However, for now, just as sort of a placeholder, I copy and then pasted or duplicated twice the icon of the cyclist. And I did not do this on purpose, but my idea was to just offset it and use a different color, which I did here. But that also created the effect of making it look like they were racing or they were cycling together. And so that's fun and happy that it turned out the way it did. And as far as, let's see here, next we have the UI patterns, and the, something is tearing my processor up there. So as far as the UI patterns are concerned, this is something I banged out very quickly, and the end result is not going to look like this. However, this is sort of the direction I want to go in. And I have semi-sharp. I might make these, I think I gave each one of these rectangles, or each one of these, rectangles, which will be turned into frames eventually, and then eventually turned into components after that. I gave them a corner radius of 2, but since I'm going with the sharp icons, I might bump that down to 0 and do A/B testing and see what's more attractive to my users. And so I made some primary buttons at 2 different sizes, and I also made secondary buttons at 2 different sizes. And then I gave an instance of what the forms would look like. And of course, to be as accessible as possible, you always label your inputs, your controls. And so I labeled, and I also created a version where there's going to be a label and a hint, and the hint's part of the label. In this case, the hint is written in overpass mono, and it's information on what is needed for the password to be appropriate. And of course, again, for accessibility and to give control to the user, I am going to include an option to show the password, so that that they can reduce the number of steps they need to create an account properly by allowing them to view their own password and make sure that it's correct. And then lastly, and it's not visible via stream, of course, but I did check, all the color contrast here on the UI elements checks out and looks good. And I also double checked to make sure that the tap targets are appropriate for these buttons. And so this top one, I believe, is 50 pixels tall, and then the one at the bottom is the bare minimum, which is 44. And even that's kind of small, I'm not sure. But this is, let's see here. Yeah, so this is what it looks like at 100%, at least on my monitor. So I'll play around with that and see what works. And the important, not lesson, but the important takeaway here is you definitely want your UI patterns to match your iconography and vice versa. So I'll make sure toward the end that everything looks good together and nothing looks like it was a mistake or is inconsistent. Consistency is the key here. And concerning forms and other UI elements, especially those that have icons, especially those that have any sort of text or micro copy, like the create account down here, or create account and all these buttons, I suppose. That's micro copy. In order to be accessible and usable by all, there are several sort of foundational ideas or principles that you want to keep in mind when you're creating these, and those would be specific, avoid jargon, use plain language, always use active voice, and that's just a general tip for writing overall. Avoid passive voice. Be concise and be consistent. And so that is the reason that I did not write register here, and I wrote create account instead, because register is it's not specific, it's vague. Register for what? Even if it's part of a form that's collecting, for example, a username and a password, and it says register at the bottom, you or I may understand what that's for, but a user who may have a cognitive issue might not understand exactly how register, what clicking on it would do. It would register, sure, but register for what? Using what information? And so create account is more to the point. It's a better description of what's going to happen when this button is clicked. And it's, again, it's very plain language, and it's an active voice. And so everything revolves around forms for me, I suppose. But these are the decisions that I'm going with so far. And then as far as imagery is concerned, there is much to be done here. And imagery is never as fun as I think it's going to be, looking for images. But, and I don't have anything here because, again, I sort of ran out of time prior to the stream. But what I would do, and indeed what I'll do right now, is let's close some of these tabs here. There we go. I had Figma running in the background, no wonder. And we'll go to, let's go to Unsplash and type in, whoop, not that way, that didn't spell anything. Go to bicycle, and again, I'm looking for an image of a bicycle that is, says savvy and dependable, professional, confident. And so I'm looking for images that have that appeal to them. And not easy searching for images like this, because I enjoy cycling. I used to cycle a lot, and I rode a single speed. And so it's tempting for me to stop and just stare at these images because they're so nice. But let's see here. I'm a big fan of an image like this, as well as, let's see here, images like this as well. I would prefer something with a user in it and not just the bicycle by itself. However, something like this is close to what I'm looking for, and also there's a mountain in the background, which is very cool. And this is the image that I actually used for the thumbnail itself for the design system, and I like that image a lot, so I'm going to go ahead and copy that image. Whoop, let's do that instead, and I would paste that here. Well, actually, I would save it is what I would do, but I would save that image and then import it into Figma, and that would be an example of the image that I am looking for. That's the sort of style or tone that I'm looking for. And I would build a mosaic or masonry style frame here full of images that are similar to this one. However, I don't want to bore any viewers with the act of going through and painstakingly choosing images and photographs and stuff like that. So I will go ahead and leave it at that. And so that is the end of this stream. And as you can see, I've gone through sort of the basics, and I've given a somewhat of a defense for why I made every choice that I've come up with so far, whether it be color palette, typography, the iconography, UI patterns, or the imagery. And yeah, and of course I will continue to develop this. This is by no means finished. This is a rough early draft of what it's going to end up looking like. And of course, if you have any questions or comments about this process, or you have anything you'd like to add, of course, you can find me on Discord, Slack, and Skype, and of course I'm on LinkedIn as well. There should be a link down below the video, in Twitch anyway. And of course, feel free to subscribe on Twitch, and you can sign up for notifications that'll let you know via message whenever I go live. And I hope everyone has a fantastic weekend. Stay safe, and I will see you next Tuesday. Have a good one.